Welcome back, and today, a slightly different way to be miserable. Believe in the right to vote. There are a lot of important issues, both personally and in public life, where we routinely use distorting words, and as a result, we tilt our thinking in an unhelpful or an outright destructive way. I'm a cognitive behavior therapist. The behavioral side is easy to understand. It's creating change by doing things, learning new skills, setting goals, facing our fears, being assertive, and so on. The cognitive side, though, is slightly trickier. It's focused on the way that we represent and think about the external world. And if some of our thoughts, beliefs, or assumptions are wrong or biased, we can wind up feeling more distressed than we need to and acting in a way that only makes things worse. So a lot of cognitive work involves looking under the hood and asking, what am I thinking in this situation? Now, sometimes we tilt ourselves in the wrong direction because we're using the wrong language. So, voting. One thing we often do is we talk about democratic societies as if there's a dichotomy. Democratic societies and non-democratic ones. Well, actually, there's quite a range there, but it's more of a continuum. Some countries are a bit more so than others. And there are various criteria that you might use. Are the elections fair? Do ballot boxes get stuffed or hacked? Does the opposition get to speak and present their point of view? In Canada and other parliamentary democracies, the Prime Minister is an important position. But in a sense, the population doesn't get to vote for Prime Minister. What you vote for is whoever's running for the party you like in your little area. And if that party gets the most seats, then they decide the Prime Minister. Mostly. In the United States, people vote directly for president. Except they don't, really. They vote to determine who in their state gets the most support. And then members of the Electoral College actually determine the president, which means that Republicans in California and Democrats in Louisiana are all but disenfranchised for their presidential vote. Which system, parliamentary or republic, is more democratic? Well, you could argue it either way. One of the little distortions that we build into our language is the idea of voting rights. I have the right to vote. Well, that's great, except if I have the right to vote, this implies the opposite as well. I have the right not to vote. I can sit at home. It's raining. Do I want to go down there and stand in line when it already looks pretty clear who's going to win? And that begs the question, do I have that right not to vote? Well, legally, yeah. If I don't vote, the police aren't going to arrest me or fine me. So I kind of do. Now, that isn't the case in every country. In Australia, for example, voting is considered a legal duty. You have to go. You don't really have the right not to vote. And so their voter turnout is predictably quite high. But Australia is an unusual case. In Canada, in the United States, in most other countries, no law says you have to vote. But are rights entirely about the law? I don't think so. We often talk about inherent human rights, which may be a bit of a fiction, but we do. This is the idea that human beings are entitled to certain rights whether or not a given country recognizes them. So maybe there are also some rights that we legally have that we are not actually entitled to. In democratic societies, the identity of the leadership can be profoundly important. This determines whether the rights we really do have get respected, whether the society functions, whether social justice is ensured, whether the institutions do what they're charged to do, and sometimes whether our armies go off to kill people in other countries, either needfully or for political gain. In some countries, it is absolutely clear that the way votes are cast will determine whether some other people live or die. And I think at that point, voting stops being a right, something you're entitled to do or not do. It becomes what I think it truly is: a duty, a responsibility. When somebody is choking to death at the next table, there may be no legal obligation to help, but if we know what to do, there is a moral obligation to act. When the way that we vote determines who lives and who dies, who is cared for and who not, who has rights and who doesn't, maybe we no longer have the right to say, oh, it's raining. I have other things to do. That lineup is so long. It's not convenient. Duties aren't about convenience. Now, I cannot tell you what to think, but I believe that if there are people who have fought for your right to be represented, whether that's Martin Luther King, Harvey Milk, Nelson Mandela, or your great-grandfather in the Second World War, then you don't have the right to vote. It's not a privilege. It's a duty. It's a responsibility. Now, what if there's nobody running, though, who you really support? Well, there are three considerations there. First, I firmly believe that we have the right to spoil our ballot, to say none of the above, or to cast a protest vote for a candidate that we agree with, but who has no hope of winning. Second, sometimes it's not about getting somebody you most want, but avoiding a dire outcome. If Adolf Hitler or Idi Amin is running for head of the country, it's perfectly reasonable to cast a vote for anyone who might prevent them from getting elected, even if they're not the person you most want. But third, a person, their beliefs, and their platform are extremely multifaceted. It's not just a matter of war or no war, environment or who cares, the 1% or the 100%. You know, it's more complicated than that. I suspect that if I had enough time to talk in sufficient depth with people about every single belief I have, every position, every value, I would eventually discover something about them that I fundamentally disagree with. Not just politicians, everyone. I doubt I could find a person on the planet that I agree with on every single issue. And I believe that the dream that I will find such a person is not a dream. It's a delusion. I won't. Not to be my friend, not to be my partner, not to be in my family, and not to be leader of my country. Not one person. So if everything is a deal breaker, I'm going to be alone and irrelevant forever, and I will never find any flawless savior to vote for. Giving up on that perfect person, that ideal leader, that person I agree with right down the line who has never done anything wrong in my view, that isn't about defeat. It's about victory over our delusions. And fundamentally, it's about adulthood. Voting is a part of adulting. There is no all-comforting mommy out there for me who's going to take care of me in all ways, who's never going to make a mistake, never let me down. And that's not disappointing. It's the simple mathematical reality. Now, I've lived through a lot of elections, and if I'm honest, yes, I've missed a few municipal ones, but federal and provincial elections, I'm in Canada, I can't miss them. I don't have the right to. My society doesn't really ask all that much from me, but it gives me a great deal, and it can contribute a great deal, for good or bad, on the international stage. I don't have to go to war. But I do have to go stand in a lineup now and then. And if it's raining, that's what an umbrella is for. Let's stop talking about the right to vote. It doesn't exist. It's a responsibility to vote.